I will call this meeting of the Isla Vista Community Service District Policy Committee to order at 6:01 p.m. I will announce that this meeting is being recorded and ask for a roll call.
Director Freeman.
Here.
Craig.
Here.
Aguilar.
Here. Now move on to our land acknowledgement. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the Chumash people who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Chumash elders, past, present, and future, who call this place, Anascoyo, the land that Isla Vista sits on, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Chumash community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. Now to the public comment period. At this time, any member of the public may speak on matters of the subject matter jurisdiction of the policy committee that are not on the agenda. The committee will not take action on any item that's not on the agenda provided by law. Are there any no?
I'm none right now.
Not seeing any public comment. Moving on to discussion and action items 3.1 employee missed shifts and scheduling policy preliminary discussion. The committee will have a discussion on employee missed shifts and scheduling policy. Give direction to staff.
Great. So we've been thinking about this one for a pretty long time. We even just had an issue today on this topic of employees who had scheduled shifts and missed it. So I just wanted to have the staff here to share with you guys some of their thoughts and experiences. And so you guys get a sense of like how things are going on the ground. And then we can have just a discussion on like what you guys are comfortable with, not comfortable with. And then we can draft a policy based on that just to be efficient. So we have Jenna, Leslie, and Fiona on the call right now. They're all on Zoom. And they all have different perspectives. Like Fiona and Leslie were temporary employees at one point before they became permanent employees. So they can share, they can share from both ends of having, temporary employees work with them and having actually been in that role before. And then Jenna manages a pretty large group of temporary employees who are, doing shifts on a regular basis throughout the year. So I'll turn it over to Jenna first, if you want to share your thoughts, Jenna, on how and your experiences on how scheduling and shifts being missed and rescheduled and all that has been for you. And we'll just go one at a time, and then we can have more open discussion. But I just want to make sure each of you get your.
So I think that it would probably be ideal at the end of the day to have set shifts. For example, 9 to 12 every day or something like that my employees work. However, I like the fact that we employ students. I think Isla Vista has a very big student population, and obviously anyone can apply, but the bulk, if not all right now, of my employees are students. And I just think that has many benefits. Given that they're mostly students, I don't want to force a set schedule upon them because I know that everyone has different school schedules. So I allow them to choose what their schedule is. And it really works out fine for the most part, but definitely we will have people who will put their name on the sheet for the week and then they'll just delete it with no explanation. And I've talked to them about this many times, but I definitely think that having some sort of policy in place that we really stick to would help the situation, because having them know that, hey, I need to actually commit to this. I can't just put it on there with the thought of potentially not showing up later in the week. So definitely that's an issue. I always have problems with people not working the full amount that they were hired to work, which hasn't been a huge issue. I don't feel that things aren't getting done because of that, but I also understand that they were hired to work a certain number of hours, and a lot of times they aren't. So maybe being brought on, onboarded with the knowledge that like, hey, this is the deal. I think that could really improve the situation. And then just as for holidays and breaks, I know that most of my workers are not available during breaks to work, which personally for Isla Vista Beautiful, it's not the worst thing in the world just because a lot of the students are gone. So there's not as much of a mess happening in the first place. But that's pretty much all I have to say on that.
Can we ask questions?
Yeah, ask questions. Yeah.
So,
I don't have a question.
oh, I thought that was,
I have a comment.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, just maybe.
I just thought it might be interesting to offer my perspective as a student who's employed by the university, through the rec cen. I'm actually scheduled by the quarter, and I really like that because I think that it gives you a lot of structure in your schedule, and you're able to treat work almost like you would treat a class. And so like having specific blocks that really like, the way that we do it is you submit your availability for the quarter based on the classes that you have, and then you're scheduled for the quarter so that you have like set times. Like I know that Thursdays at 2 p.m. I always work at the climbing gym. So I don't know that that would be the worst way to schedule folks.
the way that Jen is talking here, maybe I misunderstood, but it sounded like people are getting to schedule themselves. Is that correct, Jenna?
Yes, they're able to choose what hours they work every week. But I do
So that-
like that idea. Oh, sorry, go.
So yes, that level of flexibility, I think does allow them to, at the beginning of the quarter, just decide I have a fixed schedule.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of my more recent jobs at UCSB was being a student supervisor, and I managed I think it was 12 students for the library's reference desk. But I pulled up some of our this is the old documentation with some of our requirements. So one requirement we had was students would work at least 10 hours per week, and so that allowed us to be a little bit more selective in our process, just based on facts, because we had so many good candidates to apply, and sometimes it's hard to just pick someone. But also it allowed us to be firm with our schedule. So as was described, we had a schedule that we set each quarter based on class availability. I was giving students 4-hour blocks because I observed when I was the student employee that was like the only useful amount of time to go in, or an 8-hour block. But a 2-hour block felt like, oh, I have to go somewhere for just 2 hours, and it's not really in the student's benefit. And 4 hours allows us to look at simple break policies that the state adheres to. So I was making a schedule for my 12 students to fit into this kind of window of time. And so some quarters they might be really busy, and some quarters they might be a little bit more lax and they want some more cash. But I definitely recommend, with my previous experience, having the quarterly based schedule.
So I know we've got more
Yeah.
of our staff who can provide more interesting perspectives on this. One thing as we do this that I'm interested in is the extent to which we have positions in our various departments that kind of do need some kind of coverage. And so it sounded, Jenna, like in the case of Isla Vista Beautiful, that there actually, I'm not certain. Yes, and I'm not going to try to. I'm curious. In the case of Isla Vista Beautiful, do you need to have good coverage of times, or like in the case like a restaurant, for example, you need to have somebody there, whereas no one can serve the food? Or is it something where the work can get done when it gets done?
Yeah, I mean, there's always work to be done. There's always trash, there's always graffiti, but I've never had the overall outcome of seeing Isla Vista with very little graffiti, I believe doesn't have to do with people missing their individual shifts. I think that people sometimes missing their shifts, there doesn't need to be coverage as long as we have consistent workers, which we do. Unless the only time it becomes a problem is if something does specifically need to get done, such as a really bad, huge tag on a building. Or for example, we do reports for the code enforcement officer twice a week. So if somebody doesn't show up to that shift, that's not great. It's always something that myself or my worker Kate, who has been helping me manage, could do. So I guess my answer would be most of the time it's fine and we don't need coverage. There are just some instances where it would be better if we did.
Great. Who else do we have on the line to?
We'll go next to Maya to share her experience with which Ivy Community Center and Spaces does operate very differently than Ivy Beautiful.
Yeah.
And so if you want to share your experiences with scheduling and missing shifts, Maya.
And please also talk about coverage requirements.
And coverage requirements.
Yeah, of course. So it is very different for the community center. A lot of the stuff that I assign can be very project based, like helping out with like a specific thing that we want to get done, and some things are more consistent that get done every week. So for example, like we do maintenance checks of the spaces every week, and that is something where I don't mind one of my employees goes in and does it, as long as it gets done from week to week. I'm a lot more flexible with their schedule, as long as I know that the space is being checked on and monitored, it's okay with me. The only hard, I guess, attendance requirement is for the events that I need people to help out on. And for big events, they'll normally hear about them in the beginning of the quarter. However, I will say, events pop up out of nowhere that request support, and if they do give us at least 2 weeks notice, one of us will try to be there, but that's why it's nice that there's 3 of us. So if somebody really can't make it, one of us hops in and helps. Whereas the big events for the quarter, it's kind of an all hands on deck. So we need everyone to be there and it's expected. And I'll be honest, I haven't run into a lot of issues. I do have a lot smaller of a team. I think I ran into more issues when my team was bigger and I was expecting more help at some of these larger events. But at this point, with my team so small, if I have an event that requires a lot of help, we do a big volunteer call, or we hire that. So it is a lot more flexible with the community spaces. I don't think I would be able to assign them a shift for the entire quarter because things do fluctuate so much. But I also do feel very fortunate right now to have a team that is very on top of everything. So I guess it could if my team wasn't the way they are. So I hope we'll be starting to see my
To verify I understood, it sounds like, at least as it's currently set up with the team that you currently have, you're not experiencing real problems with respect to missed shifts or scheduling confusion?
Yeah, correct. I have had no issues with my current team at all.
Thank you so much. Questions? I didn't see any. Okay. What else? Who else we got?
We have Sydney on.
Oh, welcome back, Sydney.
Oh yeah, Sydney is welcome back. I didn't realize this is the first public meeting back. She's on through her phone. Maybe she's needing to unmute. Well, let's go to Fiona next, who's been one of the workers in the Compost Collective before she was our community engagement project manager. So you can maybe share from your perspective on that too, Fiona.
Hi, thank you, Jonathan. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm also connecting from my phone.
Yes, I hear you great.
Okay, awesome. So yes, I used to be a dirt rider for about a year. And now I work on the back end with with all the program managers. So I feel like I have somewhat of a good grasp on what it's like to be an employer at Isla Vista Compost Collective, as well as some of the struggles that Carly is facing as program manager. And from what I'm aware of, it sounds like some of the issues that IVCC faces with their employee policy has to do with weather, like when it rains, because the shifts are outdoors, as well as missed shifts due to like sickness or due to finals week. Is that correct, Jonathan?
Yeah, or just people missing a shift where that one is more essential to hit, because if you don't pick up the trash or the food scraps, no one picks it up. Yeah.
And it becomes a
Yeah.
problem that's not report to our other department.
Right.
Yeah. Well, what I honestly don't have a lot of solutions at the top of my head, but I feel like that's a synopsis of some of the issues that they're facing. And for finals week specifically, I know we've talked before about trying to figure out a way to make sure students plan ahead for finals and just make sure they do their shifts at the scheduled times. And maybe they have to adjust ahead of time because they have a final at a conflicting time. But finals week is just so chaotic. Sometimes you end up having to go home early or your finals get canceled or something like that. I almost feel like maybe for this program, it would be smart to almost plan for the chaos a little bit and just maybe at the beginning of the quarter, people could just say if they think they might not be able to work their shift during finals week, because as a former dirt rider, sometimes I would pick up other people's shifts if I had a less hectic finals week. So maybe just implementing some sort of, maybe not another policy, but something on the back end that just encourages people to be more flexible with their shifts during finals week, and kind of the employees could help each other out, and just being upfront and honest with encouraging employees to be honest with if they think they may not be able to make their shifts due to those reasons. But that's my only real thought on the matter.
I guess my question for you would be like, as a former dirt rider, do you think the quarterly schedule would work? Like, how does IVCC currently schedule folks?
When I worked for IVCC, it was a quarterly schedule, kind of like at the RecCen, where you submit your availability, and then you, based off your class schedule once you get it, and then you submit like your 2 top shift requests, I believe, and then you're scheduled 2 shifts that are 2 hours each, I believe. So yes, it is a recurring quarterly schedule, I believe. I believe that's still the case.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just confirming that it is still that way.
Oh yeah. So I believe we already have the quarterly recurring shifts for IVCC.
So I know you indicated that there has been some issues with respect to weather events and the finals weeks. I'm wondering about the magnitude of the experience. Is it something that it's come up occasionally, but it worked out, or it actually there was like, I remember that one time was kind of a serious problem and we were having a hard time finding anybody. Like what level of problem are we?
With the Compost Collective, it's the most serious, like it does happen frequently enough for it to be a problem. Where we get, because it's one where 2 p.m. on Tuesdays when your trash gets picked up. I mean, let's say I'm using trash, but if someone misses that shift and we can't fill it, sometimes we end up having one of our permanent staff just do the work, like Carly or Richard just goes out and does it. That's also not always possible. And they get paid magnitudes higher, so we're kind of then spending money in less efficient ways. So that's been an issue. And we have had some resident complaints that their bucket didn't get picked up. So we even heard this from our service users, like, oh, I didn't get my stuff picked up today. So I think it's the missing shift has been the biggest issue with the Compost Collective. And we have no recourse. I mean, we don't have anything in our policy in our policies that say what happens if you miss. There's like policies that say if you skip work for 3 days in a row, or if you no show for consecutive days, but that hasn't been the issue so far. It's been more like you signed up for a shift, you accepted it, but then you didn't show up, and we have to scramble last minute to fill it, and there's no repercussion right now.
I do feel like something to take into account when like forming these policies is like, yes, we want to be flexible for students, but speaking as like what I have seen at the climbing gym is I feel like it's important to also set realistic expectations, especially because this is oftentimes people's like first job, and like, and there are certain things that are expected of you by your employer, right? And allowing people to like last minute cancel and not show up for their shift without any consequences, I don't think really sets you up for success in the future.
Yeah. We were actually talking about that in our staff meeting today when we were prepping to be here. It's like, it's education. Like we're providing an educational service, some of these jobs.
Yeah.
So.
I have a quick idea based off of that, if that's okay. As a former dirt rider, I feel like it could be maybe a good policy to tell students or other dirt rider employees that if they have to miss a shift due to sickness or any other unforeseen reason, maybe it could be their responsibility to get one of their coworkers to cover it for them. Because when I was in the service industry, that was kind of the policy. It's no one coming to your shift is like the very last case scenario. And if you know, maybe like day of that you feel sick, you can't go, you send a text to all your coworkers asking, can someone come cover my shift? So in that sense, it would be less on the program manager's workload to find someone to cover it and more on the employee's workload.
Thank you, Fiona.
Thanks, Fiona. I think that's a great idea. I use something similar to that when I was supervising students, and it required just one more step of like notifying the supervisor, but only because we had a system where we had to have their time card in a digital tool ahead of time. And so the supervisor had to go in and manage that before they approve the time card. I'm not sure if we have that kind of like mechanism here or
similar.
Yeah, so we would have to put that extra like lip still on either the coverer or the person needing coverage to just, communicate with the supervisor, like I had to get this coverage for sickness, like please update the timesheet. And then it goes like, it's still a part of the record that maybe this person had to change or shift a lot, but they were diligent about it and they tried their best. And that does come up also in the review of like, maybe this job is a little bit too large of a time commitment for you and the other things you have going on. And that becomes a healthier conversation with the employee and the supervisor, because it is a part-time role. And most of the people we employ are students here, and that is their number one priority here. And we had a pretty complicated matrix at UCSB, but one of the important parts was the work-life balance. And so it's nearly impossible to have a perfect work-life balance. I don't think I gave anyone a perfect work-life balance. You're always going to have to lean a little bit in one direction, and I think that's totally normal. So I think it allows the supervisor to still be aware of like changes that are going on or stress that the employee might be going through, and how can we make a plan for that? This quarter I can only work 8 hours a week or whatever that might be. It still allows the employee to have like self-determination, I think.
How parallel, actually, we were putting it, how many people do we have working as dirt riders at any given moment?
Like during a day or during a quarter?
During a quarter is my
Right.
question.
I actually have, I guess I have both questions.
Both.
I'm curious, like how many people do we have available as dirt riders, and then separately from that, at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday, on like this Wednesday, how many people do we have operating?
Yeah, we have about 9 dirt riders. It fluctuates, we have vacancies and people getting refilled, but I think it's usually floated around 9 people. In terms of the people scheduled at the same time, I don't know that answer, but it's, I think it's usually spread out across the week, so there's not a lot of overlap during any given hour.
This is something I was thinking that it's a problem that might naturally be alleviated as we hopefully succeed in scaling up the program a bit. Because if one person doesn't show up out of 10 people who are frantically going around picking up stuff, that's very different scale than if the one person who's doing it right now doesn't show up. And if we have a lot of people that we're drawing from, because maybe we're hiring it as like, oh, this is a very part-time job. It's not necessarily like a half-time job. It's like it's a quarter-time job. But like, if you're somebody who wants some extra work and you happen to be able to pick up other people's shifts, then you have an opportunity to like pick up more shifts possibly if people don't show up. Some people might really like that. And if you have a pool of 30 people you're dealing with, you've got an army of people who have to be going around, then somebody might be in that situation.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at the shift schedule from last year and I just couldn't find the 2024 one, but it does look like it's 2 people usually at the same time, sometimes up to 4 of the dirt riders are working at the same time some of the days. So actually it looks like we have, you know, a lot, you couldn't maybe do that picking up as easily if almost everybody's working at the same time, which is what was the case last year.
And it also means that and if most of the people you have hired are working at the same time, it makes it more difficult to have anyone
Pick it up, yeah.
Slack off. So
yeah.
Yeah, I because this is the program that I think that we've been talking about trying to explode in scale. We as much as we'd love to, we can't explode the community center project in scale if we don't have more buildings.
Right.
There are only so many people you can have at the 2 locations we have at any given moment. Yeah.
I have Sydney and Leslie to give 2 last comments.
All right.
We can go to Sydney first, who's managed different people doing different kinds of things all at different points. So.
Or rating was saying like, "Oh, is the beautiful" is kind of like it's also something could scale up, but it's more budgetary constrained than it is because we're choosing to pay to solve a certain amount of problem. And at least I don't remember us having talked about massively scaling that up in the near future. Whereas in the case of compost collected, the dirt riders is something where we were hoping to have other people pay for it.
Right.
And so it might just suddenly spark.
Exactly. Okay. Oh, Isabel, could you unmute Sydney manually?
Oh, there's like
It's
a
called-
star code.
Yeah,
Yeah, you know what that is.
I can ask to unmute. I don't see an option for me to.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you now.
Okay, it's weird. From the phone, you have to click *6 to unmute yourself. Even though I was unmuted on my phone, so I apologize. I was talking previously, but that's why you couldn't hear me. I just wanted to hop on because I have to say I haven't run into this too much, even though I have supervised different positions in different capacities. For the most part, they've been a lot more flexible. Other than events, like outreach is pretty flexible with tabling and canvassing and that sort of thing. So I haven't run into any major like missed shifts. If something comes up, if someone's sick or whatever it may be, they can make up the hours at a later date. And usually the deadlines are people have enough time. So I really haven't run into this much. Oops, can you hear me?
Now we can.
Oh, I don't know. Were you able to hear anything?
You said I've managed different positions, and then I think we lost you there.
Okay. I was just saying that, yes, I've managed different positions in different capacities, but I really haven't run into this very much. I think because while outreach and community engagement, it's some areas are time sensitive, yes, like events and things like that. Events and things like that, but and like tabling and canvassing is a little bit more flexible. So yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought because I was talking, but so we'll have set times for certain things, but usually people can kind of just make up their hours later in the week. So but my expectation is that the intern usually or person in their position provides pretty substantial amount of notice ahead of time, and we just kind of work together to get whatever it is done. So I'm a little bit more flexible in our department, so I don't have a ton to contribute, but just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
And then Leslie, who has been a community center temporary employee before our intern.
Hi everyone. So I feel like what Maya said really applied to my situation and also like my opinion, just because the whole time that I've been working at IVCSD, I've been working under Maya, so like the community spaces, and how she was saying like most of the things that we do are project based, so we do have a more, I guess, like leniency, I would say, regarding scheduling, and because it's not super, I guess, hands-on, like in that moment, like for example like a dirt rider, and like for the events that we do have that we have to be there in person, we have the we have we're aware of it beforehand, so we can plan accordingly. And yeah, like I haven't really experienced issues with like missed shifts or scheduling issues, conflicts, but that's just me.
Thank you so much. You have a question? No. Oh, yeah.
I'm wondering, I have a question, yeah. I'm wondering, do we have anything like in our pay schedule, like shift differentials or things like that get more like incentivizing for students who like some employees might really want to work like a big 8-hour block for one of these programs? Because there are things like that throughout my observation of UCSB, like student employment, where it became a very attractive job if you just got comfortable with like managing your own schedule. And so I interact with a lot of students who were like eager for all the hours, and then it became a very competitive market. I think it's already a competitive market, like students of all different types are looking for all different kinds of jobs. But I'm wondering like where we fit into that, or how, like if we've had trouble like getting candidates for these jobs. I assume we don't have trouble. I assume like it gets pretty competitive.
Yeah,
our hiring process.
Our jobs have been pretty competitive for the most part, some not as much, but we had a little pickup position that had 50 applicants recently. So
yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking that just like I don't know, that became motivation for the students that we hired to know that like they were picked out of 50 applicants, and then they took their schedule a little bit more seriously, and they're a little bit more committed to it because they knew that they were selected out of 50 people. And it made it easier to have that conversation as a supervisor to just be clear, like, this is what I need from you in order for us all to do a good job. Mm-hmm. I don't know how that affects policy. I'm kind of getting off on a different tangent, but
yeah, I mean, what we're trying to hear from you guys is like, what are you guys comfortable with in terms of being a policy? What are you not as comfortable with? And then we can craft something. But I just wanted to make sure you knew what you guys' contours are.
Is Jenna still on the line?
Jenna's still on.
So I remember Jenna specifically near the beginning of what was being explained. There was some essentially request for some kind of policy relief. But at the same time, it also seemed like there was some nuance to that because the positions seemed very compatible with flexibility, and Jenna didn't want to lose any of that flexibility. I And I guess I'm wondering, and maybe this was answered, maybe I even asked it already, but this is one position I'm now not remembering much about the scope of the problem. Is this something where this is actually like the reason why looking for some policy relief here is because it's actually been a problem, or is it something that
We have had a good amount of experiences of, last minute no shows or.
And what I'm wondering, they didn't show, but what I'm kind of wondering is then, well, then the work could have gotten done tomorrow in this case, and it wasn't that big of a deal. Or we're in this situation of like, we had people and they happened to cover it. And I'm wondering, or was it like in the case of the compost collective, we've got now, you're saying already down to user complaints, right? But that's something that we're intending to hopefully charge for, that can become problematic, so.
And I think that's where the biggest problem.
Well, that's the
the
biggest problem. I'm
compost,
wondering, but like
but
in the case of Jenna's program.
In the case of my program, for me, it's just if I hire you to work a certain amount of hours. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. My timer went off. Yeah, if I hire you to work a certain amount of hours, of course you're gonna say, yes, I'll work that amount of hours. But then it's only some people who actually end up working the amount of hours that they had agreed to work upon hire. So I mean, I think everything is going great. And even though some people do work fewer hours than they should and cancel shifts, I still think the operations of my program itself are fine. But I do also like the idea of having a set policy about making, like Marco said, I think a minimum of 10 hours a week is a good place to start, knowing that a lot of people will want to work more. But if you do need to work less than that, then it's kind of a big deal. And then also, like I said, I do have people randomly signing up and then skipping their shifts. And like I said, it's not a huge deal, but I also would like that to not be a thing.
The employees we have in your program, how long do they tend to remain employed? Are we talking about people who come in for a quarter and then cycle out, or some people come in for 2 years and they work, or?
So
it's only been a year and a half, but
That's a good,
yeah.
for my program, most of the employees, they stay with me. I have about 4 who have been here for over a year. Maybe 3 who have been with me for about a year and a half now, actually. And then the only times that I've lost employees were one girl moved away and she was employed for a very short time, and then one other person, something similar happened, but they stick around.
I guess one thing that I'm wondering with respect to this is whether there's in some sense a separable problem, which is the problem of this was supposed to be a half-time job and you're not even working anywhere close to a half-time, versus the problem of, okay, during the course of the next 2 weeks, I need to make sure somebody's actually there at 2 p.m. and then trying to deal with all the scheduling and management of that versus the in the case of it was a half-time job and over time, you're not really doing that. I feel like we might be able to have some kind of lighter weight policy that's along the lines of each quarter we evaluate how much time you worked, and if you're nowhere near what the amount of time you're supposed to be working for, that's an opportunity that is a the kind of offense that will allow us to be we're going to need to find somebody different who's actually going to work this amount of time because it is that kind of job.
Yeah, I was gonna suggest exactly that. In my old interview questions, I explained the pay rate, I explained the shift differential policy, and then I explained that students are evaluated during their initial quarter of employment. So within that first 3 months, they're getting their first they're getting their second one-on-one conversation with the supervisor since they were hired. So there's probably 2 weeks So probably 20 hours of training they go through. And then they get on schedule. And then after that first 3 months, I'd be having to check in with them to see how it's going from my end, how it's going from their end. And then the normal evaluation cycle was every fall. So it went from just the first quarter and then a yearly evaluation. Yearly out evaluation, they would be eligible for a raise. But these are all like much larger university policies that I didn't have a hand in. They were kind of given to me and I had to like build some things around them. But I think that initial evaluation allows for this conversation of if it is someone's first job and they're an excellent employee, maybe they want to do more. Maybe this is not the first job they want. Maybe they want a very different kind of first job. And so it allows two people to have a much more healthy conversation.
So you're saying a lightweight policy on the amount of work level.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that.
And by
would kind of
evaluating
separate,
it on
yeah.
like a quarter or
Like
after that, a yearly basis,
Yeah.
it removes, I think, a lot of the complexity of like, well, what if they were legitimately sick? Like, we don't have to worry about that because it's like
Aggregate,
the course of a year, if you're
Yeah,
averages, hopefully, but.
yeah. Okay.
Separately though, then like, I don't know if that necessarily solves the problem of Compost Collective. One question that I have with Compost Collective as it currently stands is the people who we hire for it, what level do we anticipate them working for? Like, are they all half-time? Are they quarter-time? What are they expecting to do?
They're all 6 to 15 hours, somewhere in between there. So we have like some legacy employees who were on the old job description where it said 6, but then we've upped it to the higher levels for the newer people who've come on. So that was just an artifact from the past where we had it at 6, which is pretty low.
I wonder whether, I'm not even sure, like I don't have a good intuition for this, whether it's the people who are hired for almost no hours or the people who would end up not
Yeah.
because
I don't have
you
that
barely have a job
analysis,
anyway,
yeah.
and you don't think about it, or it's the people who have a lot of hours, and it's like, oh, it's not like I'm not really working. I just missed like 2 shifts. It's like I got a lot of hours. If it were like depending on that, like I was gonna make suggestions that apparently don't apply because you already have people that are like 6, but I was gonna suggest something like, what if we hired more people, like fewer hours or something, in order to have more availability for people who might suddenly be like, I'll get extra money, sure, I'll pick up that shift. Maybe there's some malincentives that it applies from the perspective of non-zero sum teamwork interactions against the policy, but we could, if we had a policy that would allow, like, if somebody is unable to work and that we have like 9 to a shift option where it's like if we're like calling in an emergency, like, hey, can somebody come in and pay you more? And that might make people feel better about the whole situation of like being willing to like, oh yeah, so I'll step in,
For an extra $1 or something.
Yeah.
I'm trying to like this because this was like such my job. I'm trying to find like old documentation, and it became, there's a foil for the desk that I managed was the circulation desk, which has on any given like quarter 40 to 50 students. So much more complicated schedule, way more hours. They had like a first third of the quarter, middle third of the quarter, and then a finals week schedule but they also had 4 supervisors. So it was like a 10-to-1 ratio. But they did have to have a much more regularly updated schedule that then these 4 supervisors would have to be like, okay, like we're redoing the schedule for midterm season, which became 7 weeks long from when I was a student, and then finals season. And so depending on the size of the program, but if our temporary employees are between like 5 and 15 in scale for each program manager, I feel like one manager can do 15 part-time employees. It is a lot of work though to like excel out a schedule like that. It's not fun. That's just a part of it.
At the climbing gym, I mean, we do like, and this is how like the entire rec center operates. So there's a lot of employees under like the larger rec center, but we do a schedule for the quarter. And I feel like while I understand that finals week is crazy and hectic, you also get the dates of your finals at the beginning of the quarter, so you know when they are, and like you also get syllabi from your professors. So like every class has a scheduled final time. Sometimes your final isn't happening at that time, but you know at the beginning of the quarter when it is. And I just think it's reasonable to expect people to like know a week in advance that they're not going to be able to make their shift finals week and need to find somebody to cover that or communicate that with the supervisor. Like, yes, I want to be lenient because you're students, but also like you're an adult and this is a job.
Yeah.
Some of the policies we had, if you're ill and cannot work your shifts, please use the telephone and email list to try and find a replacement amongst your coworkers. Notify supervisor immediately when you realize you are too ill to come in. If you are having trouble finding a replacement, we may be able to suggest someone to call or see if any students present could stay on shift for you. Please do not wait until the last minute to call. Give as much warning as possible. Please try to notify your supervisor at least 2 hours before your scheduled shift.
And I feel like those are all like such reasonable expectations for a student employee.
Maybe then, whether it's in general or scope to some of these specific departments, having a policy similar to what Marcos is describing.
I could forward this on.
See if it's enough.
If
Yeah,
this is
not enough,
useful.
we can always come back, but no, yeah, send that to me, please, and it's good to have your input, being a student working right now, so.
I mean, like, it's not always easy to work and be a student, but
Yeah.
like, it is, I don't know. I just feel like this is like, if this is your first job, you should have realistic expectations about like what's expected of you going forward. And those all align with like every non-campus affiliated job that I've had, right?
Right. Okay, thank you, and thanks to the staff who shared
Is there any
their
public
experience.
comment? Do we have any members of the public here? All right.
Yeah.
I'll be done with this agenda item then.
We'll get to
All
go.
right, moving on to 3.2, appointment process policy preliminary discussion. The committee will have a discussion on the appointment process policy and give direction to staff. So
That's you.
this is on me. So the my experience had been when we would do various appointments that the process of an appointment would oftentimes be that we would have a set of candidates that could potentially be appointed. We would then hear from those candidates, potentially have information ahead of time, we might ask questions. That part's all very, you know, I almost want to say it's easy to do that part of it. But then you end up with the process of how we actually make a decision on it. What ends up happening when we go to make a decision is that there will be a little bit of discussion on what it is we're looking out of a candidate, and then somebody will say, well, I think our decision today is clear. I move to appoint so-and-so to whatever position it is. And then if there's somebody there who separately who is interested in that, they will very quickly say, I second it. And then in the normal process of the voting mechanics under, we actually technically aren't using Robert's Rules of Order, we're using something in our policy that was vaguely similar to that. It becomes kind of weird to then mess with it because you can like maybe move for placement motion or various things. You can attempt to like, you know, bicker with the person about the motion. Technically, if you have that motion, then you like vote no on it. I think our policy does allow you to resume it, but like there are other versions of it where it's like if you voted no, it's like you can't have that same motion go on again. And it's like it gets really complicated how you're actually do with it. And so my hope had been when we needed to do this last time, that we would look at doing something different. And we tried something different in the scope, in the idea of doing something vaguely similar to like a ranked choice voting. Now, I think that there was a little bit of a circus with it when we did it. But I think my belief is that largely ended up coming down to a few things. First of all, is that because it was kind of negotiated, particularly with Marcos and I, relatively soon before the meeting, how we would do it, but we didn't like really scope out for everybody what exactly like the stages of the process would be. And so some people weren't even sure like who knew what that process would have been had it been described differently, didn't realize until the meeting that was described that was what we were doing. Secondly to that, it was our first time doing it. And so there was confusion in the actual mechanism and process of it. And then there was, I will say from the perspective of like me, very particularly at trying to like referee it a bit. I was because of the fact that it was also like trying to get buy-in on it at the same time that we were doing it. I felt at various points like I was compromising the thing that we were trying to do in order to try to like maintain buy-in long enough in order to continue the thing. And there was one point in particular where I was just feeling like, okay, we just need to move on to the next thing, otherwise this whole thing's going to fall apart. I ended up regretting that later, and in the sense of like I felt just not the results fine, but the respect of like what it did to the belief in that process having worked. And so I continue to believe that if we just like spec out that process and then make policy out of it, that it's something that could work. But I'm curious other people's thoughts. And
We're talking ranked choice voting as the process?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or
yeah.
And so I'm curious. I'm curious about other people's thoughts on that. For what it's worth, I was considering actually, when we talked about this at the end of the last meeting, maybe I'll have something drafted by this time. I did not. Then Jonathan came to me about the agenda, and he said this other preliminary discussion. He was like, "Oh, if we're doing preliminary discussion, let's do a preliminary discussion on this." Because for all I know, it's like me wasting a bunch of time specking out something that like everyone's going to push back on really hard. Like, I think we can talk about what happened last time and see if there were like really serious concerns about it, things like that. So I don't know. Other thoughts on what happened last time? Seems like you might have something about that.
Yeah, I mean, like, I agree. I like the idea of ranked choice voting. I think that, especially for like the size of our board, it's super realistic, and I think it's a good process in terms of like, appointing somebody that everyone feels at least relatively comfortable with. I do agree that in appointing Ella was a little bit of a circus just because we didn't like know quite how ranked choice voting worked, but like there are literally just like computer softwares and websites that you can use that will kind of like scope it out for you. So I think.
Yeah, we were like trying to use one last time, but it was something that I think Jonathan found hours before the thing, and then we had like typed stuff in. It was all sorts of confusing in the process of doing it. Marcos, did you have?
Yeah, I felt a lot of stress in that moment, being like that I'd only been president for like a month at that point. And so it was like, we have a new tool that's conceptual, we have a new tool that's on a screen, we have a new process of appointing someone. And so what I really wanted when I have hindsight is like to have practiced with like some kind of like apple, banana, orange type of thing where I get to like see how the idea works out. And so then I see like, how long do I want to like espouse about like the candidate I want? And then how long do I want to spend as like the chair of the conversation to make sure that everyone else speaks? How long do I want to make sure that we spend time on like open bickering, open discussion? And then the fourth component of like, we're now like done discussing and we're now like gonna present like 3 or 4 motions and then see how they vote out. Or do we even need a motion? Is it like something where we are agreeing to input numbers into a system that we all think is fair and the public believes is fair, and then we trust the system? And so it's like, then it becomes like a secondary election tool. And I was like, that now I feel way in over my head because I did not study political science. And so, I felt deep underwater, and I was like, man, feels heavy. We have great candidates here, but like, I don't really know how to navigate this conversation as a board chair.
There was a lot of pressure put on you in that exact moment.
So I would fully support that we have a policy about the appointment process. I fully support that it like builds here with the 3 of us, and then it gets to that point where we discuss it as a full board, the public is there and they understand like the ramifications of us discussing this later. So I think it's real necessary that we like start this right now with this preliminary discussion. When I think about Isla Vista is going to continue to have appointment process need compared to other small governments. So this is very essential in my opinion.
This is actually very motivating to me for what it's worth, because part of the reason why it was like, oh no, we'll get around this eventually. Okay, I'll try to draft something I do. Is the idea of like, I don't know, wasting much time drafting something. But it sounds like you actually are interested in so I'm happy to put some of the work into doing the drafting. You wanted to, but like I don't think you wanted to. So
I can work with you on it.
Yeah, I just wanted to say like I'm not trying to take staff's job.
No. You can go for it. I'll help. I'll support.
Yeah.
I guess a question for you is just like, in that moment, do you think it would have been helpful to like have like time, like a certain amount of time assigned to each of those things of like, okay, we get 30 minutes to discuss and we're like doing our thing.
That would be helpful. Like I say, like I think what you're asking is like there's 30 minutes to discuss option A, 30 minutes B, 30 minutes C, and then there comes to being like this like pure voting decision-making period. I think that would be really healthy for like the size of our board and the skill set that everyone brings to our board. I would have also liked if we had this process, because we have to announce the appointment like interview application period for, I think it was like 60 days,
Something like
within 60 days of the original office being vacated. So then we're all kind of put on notice that, oh, we're going to be using this tool that we've agreed to. Let me freshen up and do my homework again. The public, the applicants, they freshen up. The applicants know how to sell themselves better. That's something that just epiphany for me right now is that the applicants didn't necessarily know what our process was going to be, and that's not very fair to them. Some people might look at the process and think, I hate ranked choice voting. I'm not going to apply to a committee that uses this on their own, you know, that kind of philosophical choice. And that makes the board's decision easier because then there's less good candidates to think about. So I think we've always been a very transparent board and district. Getting this like off of the ground more would keep in line with that. It would help all future presidents, I think. I think most other presidents are probably going to be a little bit more understanding and savvy of like a ranked choice tool. Was completely not. Like that day was very like new for me, being like, oh, we're learning a new tool today. Yeah. I don't think today, if you ask me, like, let's do it with apples, bananas, and oranges, and I secretly decide which one I want, I don't know if I could really lead the outcome to the finish that I want. Yeah. So I would like to get this process up and like existing for future versions of me. So then they can be like, oh, I know exactly what I want to do. I know exactly what to expect and how long I want to talk, etc.
And maybe even part of the process is like when we're going through this, because ranked choice voting is foreign to a lot of people, like we have like a little blurb about what ranked choice voting is and like why we're choosing to use this tool. Like, yes, for our board members, yes, for those who are applying, but also for like the general public who, yeah, maybe they haven't gone and read our policy, but like they're attending this meeting.
I have a question about, you were both talking about this idea of having like time scoped like things like, and so but I wasn't certain if when you were talking about it, I thought maybe you meant to say that there was going to be like a period of time during which we were going to talk about pros and cons of what are not really like features and things we're looking for in a candidate, things like that, and we're not going to talk about the specifics if we want until we finish that real time period. That's what you might meant. But then like when you were talking about like a half hour for A, half hour for B, half hour for C, I started to think you might mean, or you might mean like we're going to have a fixed period of time. We're going to talk about candidate A, and then we're going to have a fixed period of time. We're going to talk about candidate B. And I wasn't certain that were you talking the same wavelength?
I was thinking what you said about my version, candidate A,
Yeah.
candidate B.
And maybe we have both of those things. Like we begin with a discussion of like, hey, what are we looking for in this candidate? Like blah 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 blah, and then like candidate has a certain amount of time to speak. We have a certain amount of time to discuss candidate. Next candidate has a certain amount of time to speak.
Yeah. I know you said a half hour, but maybe that was just like a random time.
Just
like
that was just a random.
A half hour per candidate.
Well,
We had 7 candidates last.
so we'd be here a while.
Yeah. Well, also, I don't think any of us any of us would be good at talking for 30 minutes straight.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also like I feel like this can also be like a max time limit.
Well, public comment is like 3 minutes, and so like I feel like a really good, like an excellent speaker would do like everything they could in 3 minutes, and then like most of us humans would maybe need like some back and forth over 5 to like 7 minutes in order to get our point across. But even then, that's an intimidating amount of time to be told that you're the only person talking. Because then what if other directors think, oh, it's their 5 minutes, I can't interject and ask some questions, and that could hurt a candidate's choices, like when I think about strategy.
Well, now you're kind of going in a different direction than I was thinking. Is
Yeah.
you're talking about like making it so that each person on the board has got some kind of time slot during which.
No, that's
Oh,
not
you're
what
not.
I yeah, I'm still,
That's also what I got. I'm
I'm still meaning
Okay.
that the candidate, like, yeah, like they're having like their version of like their sales pitch of who they are.
Mhm.
And then the ability for like directors to ask a question. Like we did it like that, but we didn't have a time limit.
Yeah.
Most people were under whatever imaginary time limit all of us had in our heads. And yeah.
Okay, and you are also both thinking about a time maximum.
Yeah.
The reason why I was asking that is at first when this was coming up, I thought the idea might be to be like, we want to make certain there's at least like, some period of discussion that occurs before we get to some other stage of the voting process, in which case it was almost more like a time minimum.
Well, I see the importance of that for the board, maybe, but not for the candidate. I think the candidate definitely has like a maximum. Like,
Oh,
you
yeah,
can,
I'm totally.
you
yeah,
don't
I'm-
have to
yeah,
talk for 5 minutes about yourself if you don't
Yeah.
want to.
I'm totally good with that, yeah. All right, I've got, I think, an understanding of where you're coming from on sort of thing. Do we have any members of the public here? Or staff members?
I wanted-
interested in?
I think
Let's just ask this question. Are members of the public or staff members that are?
No.
Okay, so now I've gotten that out of the way. Yeah.
I feel like something else I want to share that we did have in our most recent appointment process was like there were requested materials. So I think we requested them write some kind of like intention, and then it was emailed to all of us. And I don't know if that's like a state policy
And
or
resume. No, that was just our
We-
past practice.
our best practice. And so I feel like we asked for like a statement and a resume. Is that what it was?
Yes. Letter of intent, I think is what we call it.
Okay. I think those are the two only useful tools I can think of that don't exclude too many folks. And
I like this idea of actually specifying that part of it also in the policy.
yeah, I think it's important we specify that. Yeah, and like maybe a word limit on the intent, like statement of intent. That way folks don't feel like, oh, I'm shooting in the dark. Do I need to write a 5-page essay, or do you need, like, we should specify that for our applicants. Because I think if we put boundaries on the application as well as the process, that'll excite more people who might look at this and think, I can't imagine myself being a board member of something.
The one like, I guess, concern that I'm starting to have about this is that between like, limiting the amount of work you're supposed to put in ahead of time and limiting the amount of time that occurs, not just in they're speaking during the meeting, which I totally get, but then like also maybe even limiting the amount of time that we're discussing the individual person, is that as the board, you might think that we want to make the most informed decision about something. And you can imagine a situation where it's like, okay, well, there's still a couple outstanding questions I have, but I've run out of time to be able to ask them of this person. And now I'm gonna have to decide whether,
Like in
These two
front of
people-
everyone, yeah.
which one am I gonna choose? And it's like,
What makes me think that like, if there's a necessary, like, there should be a necessary, like, the decision-making time happen at a different meeting, which I know is hard because of the like
Notice
short
requirements.
window, yeah, notice requirements and filling requirements.
well, I'm wondering if it would like with, I think there's something very interesting about the limits on the materials provided ahead of time, because that is a black box that the candidate is just like trying to shoot at, and I totally understand that sort of thing. And we see similar things going on with even the candidate statements when they're getting elected, right? You have a certain amount of space you can put in this book, and no matter how much, you can't like go to them with $1 million and buy an extra book.
Exactly.
So you're gonna have to send mailers separately if you want to do that. But as far as the like the limits on discussion, I guess I'm starting to feel like the more I think about it, a little less comfortable I am on it. As far as like having the like a maximum of if the board is driving it, And the board seems to want to drive a discussion of one of the candidates for a longer period of time. I kind of want to let the board let it go along.
I was just thinking, like, not in terms of like, we have to control board discussion, but just to like provide Marcos or whoever is president with structure of like how the process will proceed more so.
A set of orders. We're gonna do this, then we're gonna talk about this, then we're gonna do this person, then we're gonna ask questions. Then we're gonna do this person. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then okay, so yeah, that's I feel I'm well comfortable with that.
I'm comfortable with like going in that direction.
Okay. All right. Great. We've already asked for public comment. There was none. So moving on, I think, right?
We're good to go.
That's great. Future meeting dates and future agenda items. Regular meeting policy will take place on Tuesday, April 16th, 2024 at 6 p.m. on Zoom and at the community room at 970 Embarcadero Lamar, Isla Vista, California. And I think I know how this called during some skip to it.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
At 7:06.